Afghanistan's drug addiction has again grabbed world headlines, this time at the recent NATO summit. The reports from the Senate Council, World Bank, and the U.S. Congressional Research Service confirmed a clear and present danger of the opium crisis. Though all agreed on the diagnosis of the runaway Afghan drug disease, they begged to differ on the remedy recommendations. The annual Afghan Opium Survey of the UN Office on Drugs and Crime was the first to raise the alarm in September last year.
The news is very bad. On the opium front, today in some of the provinces of Afghanistan regarding opium, we face a state of emergency.
This report stipulates that Afghanistan has reached a point of no return. If drastic and urgent measures are not taken, the country will slide into chaos.
Afghanistan is moving from narco-economy to narco-state. Opium is choking development and democratization. The rule of the bullet and the bribe exists where there is no rule of law.
Net opium poppy cultivation ballooned 60%. Opium production jumped 50%. Its export value hovers at around half of the Afghan GDP.
That is a crop of a staggering amount, 6,100 metric tons.
The Afghan Opium Survey fact sheet is not only chilling, but also offers data for analysis of the counter-narcotic strategy. Although in 2006 eradication expanded 210%, the negative trend of the downward spiral has not been reversed. In the southern region, especially in Helmand, opium poppy cultivation, enforced or encouraged by drug lords, surged 121%. A chart of Afghan opium production against the backdrop of historical periods repudiates three related myths about the genesis of the drug industry.
First, it emerged in the Soviet period as a survival strategy. Second, the Taliban banned opium cultivation in 2001 under international pressure or due to religious considerations. And third, the current government wields more control over Afghanistan than the Taliban.
The Soviet period represented the highest level of government control over the country. In 1984, opium production dropped to the lowest record level, 160 metric tons. It was lower than 200 metric tons under the Taliban in 2001, when they banned cultivation to boost the market price of their regime-controlled opium stockpiles. Therefore, if opium ban enforcement is any measure of state control, it is reflected in the latest staggering opium upsurge. The survey notes that 63% of opium farmers started to cultivate poppy after 2001. Surprisingly enough, two of the four poorest provinces, Paktika and Vardak, don't cultivate opium at all. This fact runs contrary to the claims that opium cultivation is a Hobson choice for the poor. The profitability gap between opium and wheat per hectare, almost 500 versus 500, still remains way too large for alternative livelihood to compete. Conspicuously absent in the fact sheet is any data regarding the impact of the interdiction campaign. On November 28, 2006, the World Bank and UNODC published a combined annual report titled Afghanistan, Drug Industry and Counter-Narcotics Policy. It was a sobering reality check. The bottom line, poppy eradication is counterproductive without a viable alternative livelihood program. Last year, the Afghan opium poppy bumper crop accounted for more than 90% of the global output. The bulk of the opium surge is concentrated in the insurgency-ridden Helmand for NATO Southern Province. The report reaffirms the Afghan Opium Survey findings and conclusions. The NATO-led counter-drug strategy has failed to reverse the negative trends. Drug lords further consolidated the opium business and their political clout. Rampant corruption paralyzed the eradication campaign and turned into extortion, hitting small fry instead of big-time operators. Success in reducing cultivation proved to be elusive and illusionary. A decrease in one province led to an increase elsewhere, or rebounding in the same province the following year. What mattered most, rural development programs failed to take root. World Bank experts state that drug enforcement strategy revision is long overdue. The report recommends 3 strategic adjustments. For starters, curtail simultaneously opium demand in the West and supply in Afghanistan. Then, focus on interdiction against high-value targets, drug lords and refining labs. And last but not least, jumpstart sustainable and competitive rural development programs.
Any counter-narcotic strategy needs to keep short-run expectations modest, avoid worsening the situation of the poor, and adequately focus on longer-term rural development.
The report warns a simplistic approach may backfire and cautions against indiscriminate crackdown on hawala or the implementation of aerial eradication. Hawala, an informal financial transfer system, is vital for international trade in Afghanistan, but it has been increasingly abused by drug traffickers and terrorists. The Financial Action Task Force should enforce money laundering regulations without choking the Afghan economy. Aerial eradication, if conducted indiscriminately, could trigger outrage among farmers and flare up insurgency, because the opium poppy is interspersed with other crops close to households and livestock. The question is not who is to blame, but what needs to be done. The mission is to undermine the booming drug industry and the synergy effect of the drug lords and warlords' marriage of convenience. So, who has a stake in reconciling counterinsurgency and drug enforcement policies in Afghanistan? The US came to Afghanistan to take down the international terrorist network, viewed by the counterinsurgency doctrine as the latest mutation of insurgency in the 21st century. It took some time for Washington to realize that Al-Qaeda and the Taliban exploit opium as a psychological operation to win the hearts and minds of the Afghan farmers, an ever-increasing source of self-financing global terrorism, and an incipient weapon of mass destruction against the infidels. Almost 95% of the heroin consumed in the United Kingdom is of Afghan origin. As a principal customer of Afghan opium, the UK has led the International Security Assistance Force anti-narcotics campaign. But it is Russia that bears the major brunt and takes collateral damage of Afghan trafficking bound to Western Europe along the northern route. At the NATO summit, the Russian defense minister, nowadays First Deputy Prime Minister, offered to coordinate counter-narcotics efforts between Russia and the alliance.
It is no secret today that Afghanistan poses a direct narcotic threat to the whole world. In connection with this, we have referred to a proposal we made earlier about possible anti-terrorist cooperation between NATO and the Collective Security Treaty Organization, since the latter has already developed quite a stable structure for controlling heroin trafficking from Afghanistan along the northern route via territories of the member states of the Collective Security Treaty Organization. What I'm talking about here is organizing joint anti-narcotic operations, and I'm quite sure this will yield specific positive results.
Before the United Nations, the United States and the United Kingdom tried to unify their drug policy in Afghanistan. the US has to iron out three unresolved issues. First, synchronize different approaches and priorities internally between Drug Enforcement Administration and other agencies. Second, integrate counter-drug and counter-terrorism strategies and have it unanimously approved by all NATO members. And third, allay irrational fears in Kabul and London against aerial eradication based on poppy-specific fungal herbicides. With a new U.S. general in charge of ISAF and new U.S. ambassador to Afghanistan to be appointed shortly, the United States could significantly boost the effectiveness of unified counter-drugs policy. Only when U.S. and NATO internal and external discrepancies are resolved will Russian participation be most effective.
In the nearest future, in order to strengthen the cooperation with Afghan law enforcement agencies and with our foreign partners, I mean with Great Britain, with Germany, France, maybe United States, which are situated in the territory of Afghanistan. An official representative of our service will be sent to Afghanistan. The official position of the Russian Federation is to establish so-called security belts around the Afghan border. The main aim of these belts is not to isolate Afghanistan, but to interdict the illicit trafficking from drugs trafficking.
Every member of anti-drug coalition has its own competitive edge. The US can bring to the table military, diplomatic, financial and extradition backup. The UK could implement a pacification program in Helmand, the area of British responsibility, and the Afghan opium basket case. Russia may once again use its 10-year wealth of experience in Afghanistan and expand its human intelligence support to the coalition forces. It may also offer state-of-the-art mountain-friendly interdiction, reconnaissance, airlifting and support assets, including the Ka-50 gunship, the Black Shark. There is only one way to tackle the challenge: to integrate drug enforcement and counter-terrorism efforts into cohesive narco-terrorism strategy. The new opium poppy harvest will be ripe in just 2 months. With the Taliban spring offensive creeping up, there is not too much time left to brace for the decisive battle. Evgeny Khrushchev, Russia Today.